this is a thing that people go through and no one talks about it, and we're not supposed to talk about it. And that's crazy because, like, living it, this is an experience that can be so isolating. But through doing this project, it's been the exact opposite. It's given me the opportunity to connect with people all around the world. And that's been really rad. And being able to say, like, well, I wanted to hear a thing and it didn't exist, so I made it, is super cool. I like that a lot. Hey there, and welcome to this very special episode of In Sickness and in Health, a podcast about our relationships with our bodies and issues at the intersections with chronic illness, disability, healthcare, and mortality. My name is Cara Gale. I'm not a doctor or a medical professional. I'm just a person and a patient and a podcaster who just really wants to talk about this stuff more. Nothing said on this show should ever be considered medical advice. If you're experiencing a medical issue, please seek qualified medical help. Every person is different, even within disease groups, so none of my guests should ever be regarded as official representatives or spokespersons for their conditions. Please respect their very personal choices, and unless they ask for it, please don't make suggestions about treatments or lifestyle changes. Unsolicited medical advice is never not annoying. This episode marks our first birthday. It's been 1 year since we launched the podcast with 5 episodes featuring POTS patients with different primary diagnoses to honor Dysautonomia Awareness Month. This year is a little more low-key, but we have so much more to celebrate. So for our birthday episode, I decided to do something a little different than usual. I asked my oldest friend, Casey, to interview me. We talked for so long, it'll probably wind up being at least 2 episodes, possibly more. But in this episode, we talk about why I started the podcast, what the experience of producing it has been like, how it's been different than what I expected to do, and what might be in store for year 2. This podcasting adventure has been an incredible joy so far. I never could have imagined the people I would meet or the places I would go. So here's to another year of exploring the stuff that we're not supposed to talk about. Thank you to everyone who let me ask you extremely personal questions and then share it on the internet. And thank you for sharing about all of the important work that you're doing. There would be no podcast without my guests, so I am eternally grateful to each and every one of you for helping me build this thing. And thank you to everyone out there listening, without whom I would probably have given up on this podcasting thing a long time ago. Your feedback and support has carried me through the past year, and I am running out of room in there, but I hold every one of you in my heart as I embark on this second year. I could not be more proud of what we've accomplished together, so thank you. Thanks to my patrons over on Patreon for supporting the show on an ongoing basis. Stanford, Laura, Katie, and Yarrow. Patreon enables me to accept small recurring donations on a per-episode basis to help with the production costs for the podcast. If you haven't yet, check us out over on Patreon. There are different pledge levels that come with different rewards, and patrons who support the podcast also get access to the patron-only feed, where I'll be sharing some more behind-the-scenes stuff and sneak peeks at new episodes. If you wanted to get us something for our birthday, check out insicknesspod.com/donate for links to our Patreon and PayPal pages, including a video where I describe exactly how Patreon works. Don't worry if you can't donate. The chronic life is expensive, and I completely understand. You can also help out by taking a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, which helps other people find the show. As always, find resources and more from us at insicknesspod.com, and we're on social media at insicknesspod. And on the page for this episode, I'll include some pictures of Casey and I together over the years. My dear friend Casey also happens to be a cocktail wizard with her own YouTube channel and everything. You can check her out at CaseyHartsCocktails.com. And here's my friend Rob's band, Policemen in Pickups, covering the classic Halloween jam, Monster Mash. Because 'tis the season, and stay with us to the end of the episode where you can hear the whole thing. You can check Policemen in Pickups out on SoundCloud and at policemeninpickups.com. And have a happy Halloween!
I was working in the lab late one night when my eyes beheld an eerie sight. For my monster from his slab began to rise, and suddenly, to my surprise, he did a mash. He did a monster mash. The monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. He did the mash. It caught on in a flash. He did the mash. He did the monster mash. From my laboratory in the castle east to the master bedroom where the vampires feast. The ghouls all came from their humble abodes to get a jolt from my
Even your life has gone in a completely different direction.
Oh, I know. I was doing it's so funny. I did an interview last week with a graduating Berklee College of Music student. And the assignment was to find an alumni in a field that you want to be in and interview them. And this girl, she was, she's so nice. I don't want to take more than 15 minutes out of your day. And I was like, I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to be on this phone call for at least an hour and a half. She was like, what? I was like, because the first question you're going to ask me is, what did I do when I left school and how did I get to here? And I'm going to tell you that answer is going to be an hour long. And then anything you want to ask me after that, we can wrap up in probably 20, 30 minutes. And that was exactly how it went down. Because, you go through the whole meandering path of it. And, I couldn't have made this shit up. You can't make it up. And, life moves at a really weird spot. And you're right. I think what you want changes over time. I mean, there was a period of time where I thought, I want to be in public relations and social media, and I want to own a digital ad firm. And I know, right? I thought that for a hot minute. I was like, I could totally do this.
You absolutely could have.
I mean, I was good at it for the time when it was my passion and I was into it. But ultimately, I think, where I am now is where I was sort of supposed to be, but also it's ultimately what I wanted. And had I not gotten the opportunity to do it, I think I always would have felt a little incomplete. I think that's what makes me good at it, is because I have such a deep appreciation for it, because I worked so hard to try and do it for so long.
And also because you had other experience. I think that that's something that doesn't get a lot of appreciation.
Totally.
People say you have to do X, Y, and Z to do this, blah, blah, blah. But the people that I know that are the most interesting people are the people who have done all sorts of shit and had these really zany, zigzaggy kind of lives, and then wind up coming to something with so much this wealth of varied experience that I think is really important. Sure, if you want to be a doctor, you have to go through these very specific steps to get there. But the most interesting doctors that I know are the people who found ways to either, kind of simultaneously do something totally different, or kind of figure out how to do different things within that framework.
Or went 180 degrees in the other direction, I mean, and that's right. That's what's interesting about it. And I think you're right. Being at this point, I would not have been good at this job 8 years ago. If I had, come out of college and gone straight for this, I wouldn't have appreciated it. And I wouldn't have had all this other experience that
makes you awesome at your job now.
It really does. I mean, everything from packing orders for an electronic cigarette company to working for an 85-year-old lunatic who owned a supplement company. I mean, just weird stuff, writing songs for people's weddings. I mean, like I've done so much, yeah,
Oh, I
I've done
forgot
so
you
much
did that.
weird stuff, but ultimately,
Yeah.
on a very regular basis, I find myself going, actually, when I worked for this company, we did something similar to this. And it's
Yeah.
180 degrees different from where I am now. I mean, I'm a concert promoter. Like that is nowhere near what I used to do, but it comes up often in problem
Yeah.
solving and time management, in meeting with people, in
Yep.
building partnerships. I mean, everything you can think of, all of that comes into play. Um, and I think that's why I am where I am now. And I think for you, very, very, very similar experience, going through all of
Oh,
this stuff and finally seeing it kind of culminate and come together and creating this community that you have around this information that you're sharing. It's
mhm.
really, it's fun to watch. I got to tell you, as much as,
Yeah.
as
It's
much
been
as the
wild.
podcast and the medical parts of it, I mean, admittedly make me really uncomfortable sometimes just because of the sheer severity of it all, right? And remembering
Yeah.
like it's cool that we're talking right now and I'm looking at my computer screen and I'm just seeing In Sickness Pod as your name. Um, Admittedly makes it a little bit easier than when you're sitting in front of me telling me all these things that you're feeling and I'm sitting here going, this is like my best friend since I was a kid telling me that basically you're in a constant state of pain 24/7, but it's okay. You know, um, it's wild, but I
Yeah.
think what's been cool is to watch you create something special out of that. And I think what you said earlier, and don't take this as a knock, but you saying earlier that you're not exactly known for being the most positive of people. That's 100% true. And so to see
Yeah. No, I am like, I'm
and
very
to
aware of
see
that.
you at this point in your life with so much of this seemingly being against you, taking it and totally creating something cool for yourself. I mean, it's kind of uh, the first time I've really seen you make lemonade out of a shitload of lemons, I guess. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is cool, and it makes me very proud to be your friend and very proud to
Oh, thank
you
you.
know, get the opportunity to help you tell your story on your podcast on this 1 year anniversary. It's a very cool moment and I'm very honored that you asked me to come be a part of this.
Oh,
I have it
that
feels.
that makes, yeah, I was just about to
I
say I'm
have a lot
having
of feels
feelings.
for you, but it's
Yeah.
it's very, very cool to see you come to a happier place in spite of all the things going on around you and inside of you.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's so bizarre. I mean, the fact that I'm on the right antidepressant helps. Like I straight up, I'll start right there. Like that's not the fact that I'm like a lot happier now and able to, I feel like my threshold for dealing with bullshit
Yes.
is a lot higher. Um, and that is directly, at least a large portion of it, in part to the antidepressant that I'm on. So, but yeah, I mean, I like part of it is that, but part of it also is simply just age. I think we're about to.
Don't say it.
Oh my
Why are
God,
you
we're
saying
about to
these
turn
things?
30. Because what I was about to say next is that with age comes wisdom and peace, like becoming more peaceful, I think, and like less, like have less of a sense of urgency,
I would agree with that.
which kind of goes back to what I was talking about with like being able to be like present and in the moment. I don't know. So like all of this stuff kind of comes together, and like all of my work experience also came together like in like a very specific way to prepare me to do a podcast, scheduling people. I was an administrative assistant for a while, coordinating people. I've done so many different coordinator jobs. Even, I mean, like I am so shy in general, but having worked training people and stuff like that, like that's a really specific skill set that I use almost constantly doing this
Absolutely.
podcast. You know, so like all these different things that came together to just like make this very specifically something to do. I have told this story on other people's podcasts, but I don't think I've actually talked about it on mine, which is like my podcaster origin story.
God, thank you for helping me interview you, because there's just so much now. There's so many things
I know, there's a lot here. Yeah. So yeah, 10, 11 years ago, my foundation year in art school, I had to take a sound communication class. And all semester, I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. There's something about sound, and I still have a hard time with it. There's something about audio that like doesn't really click for me. Like, I'm a huge consumer of spoken word and podcasts and stuff like that. But like, there's something about like recording it,
the technical part of it,
understand. Which is so weird because like technically in other areas I am extremely proficient, but something about audio, which is why my podcast still sounds like shit a lot of the time.
That's all right.
But anyway, back to the origin story. So I was in this class, and all semester we're like recording on DAT tapes, which back in the day, which I mean, this is so funny. There's still digital audio tapes, but there's like the technology seems like
that was a long
ago.
time ago, my friend.
Yeah, and I just had the hardest time with my DAT tapes and like the hardest time with Pro Tools. I just could not get my shit together. And I think my teacher just gave me a B- because he felt bad for me. Just get me out of the class. It wasn't. I mean, it was something that was like a foundation thing that I needed to take, but it wasn't something that I was going to need for my major. So he was just like, I'm not going to fail you and ruin your life. Just quietly move out of this class. But during the, I guess people who don't go to art school don't have the experience of like final critiques, which I guess it depends on the class. Sometimes they're individual, but a lot of my classes were group crits where they would play the project and then everyone would give feedback. And so during our final critique, another classmate of mine got up and introduced his project saying like, you know, I wanted to do something like This American Life. And I found his project really interesting. So I wrote down This American Life, and I went home and I downloaded it and I listened to my first episode and was like, oh, this is what we were trying to do all semester.
This is what we were going for.
Now I get it. Like, finally understood. And I think my teacher like didn't play us that kind of stuff because he didn't want us to try and rip it off, like just try and do that. He wanted to see what we could come up with on our own. But I needed to hear something that made sense to me for me to be able to access this medium. And I have been listening to podcasts ever since. So it never occurred to me to start a podcast until like 10 years into my podcast listening. So I had 10 years worth of podcast listening under my belt before I even thought about making my own. Yeah. And it's just so funny because if you had told me 11 years ago that like, you'll be making a podcast someday, I'd be like, first of all, I don't know what that is. And second of all, I think you're wrong.
I hate audio engineering. Have a good day.
Right. And I still do. That's the funny thing. I mean, I don't hate it. It's just, it doesn't actually come natural to me. And I wish that I was going to say, I wish I had an intern, but I have to revise that to say, I wish I had a whole staff of people that could like research for me and, you know, like at least assemble some sort of written thing for me. Like, so much of this stuff is so much work, and I just wish I had like a whole staff to do it.
It's so much more rewarding when you just get to do it all by yourself.
I guess so. I don't know. I like to collaborate with the right people. I like to collaborate provided I have the right people to collaborate with. That's actually how I prefer to work. Because I prefer to like share in the spoils and whatnot. And I like to bounce ideas off of people. So doing this in solitary has been kind of rough. But at the same time, you're right, because I can look back and I can say, like, there are shows that have entire staffs that only put out one episode a month, you know? And like, sure, those episodes are way better than mine. But I mean, considering the fact that I do this single-handedly obviously with the help of my guests, but you know, I do 95% of the work. And for a while I was doing an episode every week, which was completely insane. It was so much work, and add to it all of the stuff that I deal with my health. I mean, just specifically chronic fatigue and brain fog alone. Like, there's literally no reason why I should have been able to do this, and yet here we are. You know, I've been doing this for a year, and I'm so proud of what I've been able to do. And I have met incredible people from all over the world and had all of these like unbelievable opportunities that I never in a million years would have imagined. You know,
it is
it's
wild.
It's awesome.
So proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I'm proud of you too.
Pride, hugs, friendship. I'm proud of you. I think this podcast is so rad. I think you have created something really special and unique for, you know, not only folks like yourself who are suffering from some sort of chronic disorder or may think that they have that and are still on the path to getting some sort of diagnosis and, you know, getting somewhere with it. But also for, you know, those of us outside of it who are close to you, who are going, I don't get this at all. You know, it's really helpful and insightful for us to kind of get a look at what you do deal with on a daily basis and what you sometimes feel like you can't tell us about and can't explain. It's helpful to kind of let us into your world a little bit.
Right. And that was exactly what I wanted to do with the show. Is create something that people who are living with this stuff can give to somebody else and say, like, I know that you don't understand what I'm going through, but like, if you could just listen to this, like, you might get a slightly better idea of it, or you might get a better idea of just how much you don't know, which is always like, and this was something that I was really interested in when I was training people, which is just like kind of illuminating. You don't know what you don't know, and like, how do we illuminate that and figure out where to go next?
You don't know what you don't know, and you don't even know what to ask to get the answer.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
There's no good way to get there without having a little bit of extra time and kind of letting that story unfold.
Right. And they trained us to use this really corny phrase, which is so corny, but I still use it constantly, which is, I don't know, but let's find out together. And that has served me so well over the years, and in doing this and in dealing with my own health. The podcast has been different in a lot of ways, though, than I expected it to be.
How so?
Because when I set out, I thought I was going to mostly talk to people I already knew. Because I feel like everyone that I know has health problems. I mean, not everyone, but it feels that way sometimes. So I thought I would just, you know, be talking to friends and family and whatever. But what I realized is that people have a really hard time talking about this stuff. And it takes a lot. Like, you have to be in a certain place with it to be able to talk about it in private, first of all, let alone talk about it and then make that conversation public. So what I've wound up doing is talking to people who are already out there talking about it, different advocates, you know, and doing advocacy work in different ways, because not only are, you know, they're already out there, they're already talking about it, but they have kind of done the work to figure out what their story is, because you don't even necessarily know what you've been through until you start talking about it, I think. And some of the feedback that I've gotten from some of my guests is that even though they were already talking about it on the show helped them figure some things out, which is like my favorite thing to hear. But I thought I was going to be doing like more straightforward science communication, where I would be at the beginning of each episode kind of talking about different medical conditions and describing them and like teaching people about them, which I still would like to do, but it requires just way too much research and writing, and my brain can't handle that. So what the show's turned into more is more like my magnifying glass, you know, where I am filtering everything through my own experience, which of course I am, because that's what we do with everything. But that's what we have. But I'm doing it in a, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but more conscious manner, because the only like the best way that I figured out how to relate to people and how to relate to what they're going through is through what I've been through in my own experience, which I also kind of struggle with, because I'm like, well, I don't want to make it all about me, but I am the person who is single-handedly producing this show, and
lens that we're looking at it through. That's what it is.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Right. And so that's, you know, I've kind of leaned more into that, because it's just because I'm so like limited cognitively, especially in the last several months that I've been dealing with more headaches. That this is just like the way that I can do it, you know, through my own limitations and my own approach to it. And so that has been interesting, because I wind up sharing so much more of myself than I intended to at the outset. Like because I was so uncomfortable. I'm very shy. I'm so uncomfortable with being like the person who's like out in front doing the thing. If I could have hired somebody to play me on the podcast, I would have. And of course, like now I'm way more comfortable with it, but yeah, that's just been really interesting to kind of come to terms with and play around with. And I don't know, people seem to like me, which is good.
Well, because you make it relatable and easy to understand.
Right.
And there's everything about that is good and helpful. Especially for me, who's going, I can't pronounce anything you have except for migraines. I mean, let's be real. I can't pronounce any of those things. You could say them to me a million times. And I know POTS, because thank God it has an abbreviation. Yeah. But, you know.
You know what's bullshit, though? I can say postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome 5 times fast, and I don't even get a medal for it.
At least, like, a Gatorade. Because that's a workout.
Right? I think so. Yeah.
But I do think that's kind of the charm of the show, is that, you know, you have a genuine passion for what you're talking about, and a genuine passion to communicate to others, so that maybe it is a little bit easier for someone else than it has been for you to explain to the people around you what's actually going on.
Yeah. And I mean, this is such an untapped niche. Like, I basically, you know, when I did finally realize, like, oh, I should do a podcast, was that I was listening to tons of the Mental Illness Happy Hour, and he's had some people on the show who've had physical illnesses. And so I was going back and trying to listen to those and looking for more. And I just wanted more of people talking about what they've been through medically, and just was not finding it. And I was like, this is, it's amazing how I can be like deep in thought and talking about something, and then the next second have it be totally gone from my brain.
We were talking about the Mental Illness Happy Hour and listening to the episodes with the folks with the physical.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I was going back and trying to find episodes where people had talked about that kind of stuff, and I just wanted more. And I was looking for other podcasts that talked about that sort of stuff and just really wasn't finding it. So I decided to make the show that I wanted to hear. And then I found like a few other shows that were kind of doing what I was doing, but not, but like, you know, there could still be 1,000 shows who do this sort of thing, and it would still be different from the show that I do because it's my show. And so it's been really exciting to see like a few more pop up since I've been doing this, because like the market is there. It is absolutely there. There is a huge 1 in 2 American adults lives with a chronic health condition, you know, and obviously for some people it's more intense than others, but like this is a thing that people go through and no one talks about it, and we're not supposed to talk about it. And that's crazy because like, you know, this is an experience that can be so isolating, but through doing this project, it's been the exact opposite. It's given me the opportunity to connect with people all around the world, and that's been really rad.
That.
And being able to say like, well, I wanted to hear a thing and it didn't exist, so I made it, is super cool. I like
Rad.
that a lot.
Well, I love it. I'm grateful that you started it. Yay, podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad people listen. Like I knew people would, I hoped people would listen. I did not expect to have the response that I did, even like within the first week. It's pretty wild. Like let's see, our birthday is on Wednesday, and I have this little spreadsheet.
Oh, spreadsheets.
Yeah, no, I love spreadsheets so much. Now that I'm not working, I had to like find an excuse to use spreadsheets. Let's see. So I've had this spreadsheet going this whole year, of like different metrics, you know, the plays that we've gotten and YouTube plays and Twitter followers and whatnot. And then I made a separate sheet within this file of like little goals that I want to hit before our birthday. So our play count is not quite, but we might actually hit 15,000 for our first birthday. Yeah. We hit 1,000 Twitter followers within our first year. We're at 197 Facebook likes. I'm hoping to get to 200. We've had almost 7,000 unique site visits. Yep. Over almost 12,500 page views in our first year. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's really wild. Like, what? It blows my mind.
That's
and it's
awesome,
like, so
though.
Because like, what do you mean there are people all over the world listening? Like if I pull up my SoundCloud stats, let's see. And within the first week, like I was getting plays in New Zealand and India and all over the place.
That just shows you how widespread, you know, this is, and how relatable.
Right. Yeah, because I thought like, okay, yeah, obviously the American healthcare system's totally fucked, so like Americans will want to listen to this, but like literally all over the world. So I like the United States is my most listened, and then Canada, the UK, Australia, Sweden, New Zealand, Denmark, Ireland, Brazil, Germany, Singapore, Norway, Ecuador. Shout out to Ecuador, who was like one of the first, whoever is listening in Ecuador was one of the first places that like internationally kind of blew up. Yeah. So I want a bumper sticker that says I'm huge in Ecuador. Austria, Netherlands, Colombia, Belgium, France, Romania, Hungary, India, Thailand, Argentina, Iceland, Greece, Israel, the Philippines, China, Indonesia, Guam, Finland, South Africa, Japan, Croatia, Switzerland, Italy, Mexico, Costa Rica, Portugal, Bolivia, Morocco, Fiji, Turkey, Iraq. What? Who is listening in Iraq? Hi. Puerto Rico, Saudi Arabia, the Czech Republic, Egypt, Russia, and Haiti. And apparently 142 plays in other countries, but those are the top
That's
50.
crazy. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's, I mean,
so
what?
What's next for the podcast?
That's so crazy.
What are we doing in year 2?
So year 2 is going to be different, I think, in a lot of ways. Because if I were to stop doing the podcast now, I would be so proud of what I did with it, you know? I think that, like, as a body of work, the first year can kind of stand on its own, and I can kind of experiment a little bit more in the second year. And kind of chase down some things that, like, I'm more interested in personally, which I definitely did a lot in the first year too, but just, I guess my lens might be a little different, we'd say. So I want to do actually a series about end of life issues. Before I went to California, I wanted to, one of my friends in the EDS and POTS community actually passed away. I think it was back in August or maybe the beginning of September.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And thank you. Yeah, her name was Jess Jacobs. She was a fucking powerhouse of an advocate. She worked in health IT and policy and just really, like, was awesome and brilliant and hilarious. And wow, I'm getting emotional. So she died rather suddenly. She was not expecting to. She actually adopted a cat earlier that week. And so that was, I mean, like we talked before, I'm very aware of my mortality and I kind of confront it on a daily basis, but that was still a huge wake-up call in a way that I don't think I had gotten previously. Because, you know, you hear about people in the community passing away from various reasons. You know, obviously we're all very medically complicated and a lot of shit can go wrong. But it's different when it's someone that you know and someone that you considered a friend. And, you know, Jess especially, like, we needed her. That was, like, all that I kept thinking was, like, she can't be gone because, like, we need her so badly. You know, she understands the system in this, like, really unique way from both the inside and out, and had all of these, you know, really important connections. And, you know, so, like, of all the people, why did it have to be her? And it's just, you know, our health was very different. She was really sick, and she had been really sick for a long time. So it's not like oh God, this is so hard to talk about. She had actually just moved back to where her family was from in California because she was living in the DC area and was having a really hard time getting care coordination, you know, in this major metropolis that's supposed to have all of these really great hospitals. Her complex condition, like mine, existed outside of anyone's specialty, and she had a hard time to get any doctors to take responsibility for her and her care. And, you know, so that's, you know, the manifestation of all of my worst fears. Like, that is, so that was just particularly horrifying. But all of that said, you know, losing her was a huge catalyst for me to kind of double down on my advocacy efforts for complex patients and for improving care coordination for us, and also to make sure that I got my own shit together so that if something does happen, my partner and I are not married, so he would not be able to, without, the proper legal stuff, would not be able to make any decisions based on, end of life stuff. And I'm not sure that I would want him to anyway, because he's not great in a crisis. So I, for a long time had been meaning to get my advance directive and everything all settled so that my choices were known and so that people would not have to make those very difficult decisions at a time where they're, most vulnerable. So I coordinated with a few of my friends. One of them is going to be the executor of my estate and living will and like healthcare proxy. And then somebody else is going to handle my digital legacy and like all of my online stuff. And then somebody else is going to throw in my party. Yeah. So I have very strong feelings about end of life decisions for me specifically. This does not have anything to do with anyone else. These are decisions for me and my end of life. I'm not casting judgment on anyone else's.
They're important to think about. I mean,
oh, absolutely. And like to think about before you're in that situation, because when you've lost a loved one or are on the verge of losing a loved one is not the time to be making decisions. And if you have not talked about it with the people in your life and with the people that are able to make those decisions for you, they might wind up making decisions that you would not want. And I feel very strongly about that kind of stuff. And so I just wanted to make sure everything's on paper, that the right people can sign the papers and, whatever. Cause I like everything from, if I wind up on life support to what I want done with my body after I'm dead, very strong feelings all the way to the end. So I just wanted to, make sure that I got that all done before I went to California. So I did all the paperwork, but we haven't like signed it yet. So I'm gonna. This was a really long way of saying that I'm gonna do a series about death and record a conversation with my healthcare proxy and kind of go through a lot of those details. And then when I was at MedX, I met a bunch of people that work in palliative care and stuff like that. So I'm going to be doing a series of interviews with them because that's something that's really an area of interest for me, and just kind of do a series about end of life issues that gets people thinking and talking about this stuff, because we all just wander around pretending that we're not going to die, which is bananas to me.
I totally get that. I mean, I think this is probably why we're friends, but like I've had a living will since I was 15. Yeah.
What? I didn't know that.
Since I took what is the class called? Legal issues or whatever.
I didn't even know we had that at our high school.
And he forced us to write an advance directive for our healthcare and a living will. And I did. And I have updated it probably once a year for the last, almost 15 years. Because and it's awesome. Something I've been really open about too with my family. I mean, my mom, she's been telling me since I was 5, and it really upset me that she wanted me to donate her body to science, and that's really confusing when you're a kid going, but no, we bury dead people. And my mom's like, not always. And here's how it works, things like that are
so funny. I could totally see your mom doing that to a 5-year-old
I mean, every time I go home. So when we die, do you want the family portrait? Because it's really important to me. I mean, it's been a conversation in our house since I can remember, and I find myself doing the same thing. I mean, I I went to LA. That is not far. That is a 2 hour drive for me. And I dropped my dog off with, one of my other really good friends. And I said, just FYI, if anything happens to me or, my partner, Nico goes to your house and I have a life insurance policy and my dad will give you money from it to take care of my dog. And that is how everything is set up. So if you have any questions about it, this is what it is. And her text back was, Jesus Christ, like, what is wrong with you? You're going to LA for 4 days to stay in a hotel for a conference. I'm like, I know, but, you never know.
You never know. Like, you could get hit by a bus tomorrow or
Exactly.
like whatever,
And, being
Yeah.
prepared is better than not.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I've been I guess the people that have self-selected to be my friends are all weirdos anyway. I've been so grateful that like when I've brought this up with so many of my friends, they're like totally on board. So like the person that's going to throw my memorial service. Yeah. And we were just like chatting on the phone one day and she said something like vaguely death related. And I was like, oh, by the way.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So I've had several, all three of the people that I like roped into my end of life planning, were like totally on board with it. So I've been fortunate in that respect, but the vast majority of people like do not want to talk about it. And that is ridiculous. So that's one thing that I want to do with the podcast. I want to go to more live events. So I was like interviewing people at MedX, and then I interviewed a bunch of people at the Dysautonomia International fundraiser the other night, and that's really fun. I like doing that a lot, and I wind up talking to so many more people than I otherwise would because I am so shy. I normally will just like sit in a corner with like the person that I met when I got there, but that sort of thing kind of makes me kind of break out of my box and like talk to people that I otherwise never would, which is great. So that's another thing that I want to do. I want to maybe talk to some people about therapeutic use of psychedelic drugs. That's something that I'm really interested in.
Let's get interesting.
Yeah. Let's get weird. So I think the slogan for year two is let's get weird. Yeah. I mean, and I'm still definitely going to be talking to people about the same stuff that we talked about in year one, but I think the big theme from year one was kind of the path to diagnosis and how long and winding and devastating that can be. And so I talked to so many people on the podcast and then got so many stories via email and stuff like that from people about, girl has weird health problem. Girl goes to the doctor, gets told she's crazy, and just like that same thing over and over again. And the sheer volume of how many of those stories exist is really devastating. And is something that really has been emotionally very challenging for me to bear witness to and to hold in this first year doing the podcast. And I'm so grateful to everyone that shared their story and it, but for my own mental health, I think I can't focus completely on those stories. At least not entirely, because it just is devastating. And it's also, I mean, I'm not there anymore. The first couple years, I was still very much living inside of a new diagnosis and it being very new, all of it being very new. And the steps that I had to take to get there were still so fresh, and those wounds were still very fresh. And now that I've had some distance from it, it's kind of like, okay, but now what? Like you were asking me before. So going forward, like what, now that you have all of this, now what? And so I think that's another place that I'd like to put my focus is like the diagnosis thing is huge, but once the dust settles from that, like,
Right.
now what? How do we live with this? How do we make space in the world for people who are not going to get any better, but aren't necessarily dying any faster than anyone else is, because there's not a lot of space for that. And, and not just be so focused on this one, not necessarily one point in time, but this one period of time for people. So I would like to explore that a little bit. I definitely want to talk to more different kinds of people. I've had an overabundance of white ladies on the show. So definitely just breaking outside of my network. And although I'm a little bit proud of how many ladies I've had on the show, because podcasting is such a male-dominated space. And there's so many male voices in the podcasting universe, whether it be podcast hosts, podcast guests, so many white guys.
Yeah.
But not to get too caught up in the gender binary.
Whole other topic.
Yeah.
I feel like we have so much to talk about. There's so many things.
We do have so much to talk about.
This might be a two-parter, my friend. I think this has to be 2 parts because there's so much shit to cover. And now I have way more questions, but they're going to go for a while.
Thanks for listening to this episode of In Sickness and in Health. Check out the episode page for links to some of the stuff that came up in this episode. You can find resources and more from us at insicknesspod.com and on social media at insicknesspod. Find Casey and all of her cocktail wizardry at CaseyHartsCocktails.com, and find this cover of The Monster Mash by Policemen in Pickups on SoundCloud. And don't forget to be excellent to yourselves and each other.
I was working in the lab late one night when my eyes beheld an eerie sight, for my monster from his slab began to rise, and suddenly, to my surprise, he did a mash. He did a monster mash. The monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. He did the mash. It caught on in a flash. He did the mash. He did the monster mash. From my laboratory in the castle east to the master bedroom where the vampires feast, the ghouls all came from their humble abodes to get a jolt from my electrode. They did the mash. They did the monster mash. The monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. They did the mash. It caught on in a flash. They did the mash. They did the monster mash. The zombies were having fun. The party had just begun. The guests included Wolfie, Dracula, and his son. The scene was rocking, all were digging the sound. Igor on chains, backed by his baying hounds. The coffin bangers were about to arrive with their vocal group, the Critique of Five. They played the mash. They played the monster mash. The monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. They played the mash. It caught on in a flash. They played the mash. They played the monster mash. Out from his coffin, Drax's voice did ring. Seems he was troubled by just one thing. He opened the lid and shook his fist and said, "Whatever happened to my Transylvania twist? It's now the mash. It's now the monster mash. The monster mash. And it's a graveyard smash. It's now the mash. It caught on in a flash. It's now the mash. It's now the monster mash. Now everything's cool. Drax a part of the band. And my monster mash is the head of the land. For you, the living, this mash was meant to. When you get to my door, tell him Johnny sent you. Then you